The n-buri-Gh&acirc. I cannot believe that in 3 chapters, J.R.R. Tolkien gave us one of the coolest and the most interesting characters in the entire book. He gave him a culture, a language, and just an incredible amount of wisdom and just plain coolness. He has quickly ascended into the ranks of being one of my favorite side characters. When I was doing the live read, someone said that he is like Danny DeVito, but in a grass skirt. I can't get that image out of my head. But the Ghn and the Woses are such cool characters. They feel like the indigenous people of Middle-earth. And I just want to spend an essay talking about how cool they are and how much I like them. Particularly the Ghn, or is it just n-buri-Gh&acirc? He's one of those characters who just pops in the story at a random time and just gets me so hyped to be in this story. And just the things that he says are so cool. There are so many things that I want to talk about this guy, but first make sure you subscribe as I am reading through Lord of the Rings for the first time. And I'm just publishing a ton of video essays about my thoughts as I read. And I don't know all the lore about these people, so this isn't one of those lore videos. This is just kind of me talking about my experience with them and how I think they are just the coolest people ever. But what I do know comes in the 5th chapter of The Return of the King, called The Ride of the Rohirrim. That's the chapter I'm currently at. In this chapter, the Rohirrim are on the edge of the Druidine forest, right here, next to Minas Tirith. This is still about a day's journey for them to get to Minas Tirith, but they are tracking along this road. Yet scouts of Rohan report that there are trenches and snares set up for them on that road that will slow them down. But there are also parties of orcs that are also going to try to hinder them near the Amundine. So our first introduction to these wild men, called the Woses, is a really mystical one. It's night and the book says, Merry wanted somebody to talk to. And he thought of Pippin. But that only increased his relentlessness. Poor Pippin shut up in the great city of stone, lonely and afraid. Merry wished he was a tall rider like Eomer, and could blow a horn or something and go galloping to his rescue. He sat up, listening to the drums that were beating again, now nearer at hand. Presently he heard voices speaking low, and he saw dim, half-shrouded lanterns passing through the trees. Men nearby began to move uncertainly in the dark. A tall figure loomed up, and stumbled over him, cursing the tree roots. He recognized the voice of Elfhelm the Marshal. I am not a tree root, sir, he said, nor a bag, but a bruised hobbit. The least you can do in amends is to tell me what is afoot. Anything that can keep so in this devil's murk, answered Elfhelm. But my lord sends word that we must set ourselves in readiness. Orders may come for a sudden move. Is the enemy coming then? Asked Merry anxiously. Are those their drums? I began to think I was imagining them, as no one else seems to take any notice of them. Nay, nay, said Elfhelm. The enemy is on the road, not in the hills. You hear the Woses, the wild men of the woods. Thus they talk together from afar. They still haunt Druidane forest, it is said. Remnants of an older time they be, living few and secretly, wild and wary as the beasts. They go not to war with Gondor or the Mark, but now they are troubled by the darkness and the coming of the orcs. They fear lest the dark years be returning, as seems likely enough. Let us be thankful that they are not hunting us, for they use poisoned arrows, it is said, and they are woodcrafty beyond compare. But they have offered their services to Theoden. Even now one of their headmen is being taken to the king. Yonder go the lights. So much I have heard, but no more. And now I must busy myself with my lord's commands. Pack yourself up, Master Bag. He vanished into the shadows. So already we learn a few things about these guys. They are kind of neutral, but they seem to be having, their hand a little bent to assist Rohan. Not by Rohan, but because they are afraid of the dark years again. And I think it's a really interesting thing to do in this chapter that we get the information about the Woses from a man of Rohan. Because his language that he uses here is tinged with bias already. He says that they haunt the woods rather than they live in the woods, which gives the implication that to Rohan and to the men of Rohan, they might seem to have some kind of magic surrounding them, or they're just like strange men. They, at least for sure, seem to me like the indigenous people of Middle-earth who have had, maybe fled their home in search of peace, but because something the Ghan says about why he wants Rohan to succeed also seems it's like they just want peace for this reason. But again, them haunting the woods rather than living in the woods seems like it has this aura around Rohan. They seem a bit more animalistic to Elfhelm, because they are wild and wary as beasts and remnants of an older generation. I'd love, and I'm going to say this a lot, I'd love to get a closer look at who they are and what they do and, how they live their life on a daily basis. They seem like such an interesting culture. Elfhelm also seems to revere these guys, if not to just to fear them a bit. He's glad they're not hunting him because they use poisoned arrows and they're woodcrafty. So, they're experts in furniture making. Just kidding. They are excellent woodsmen, which I don't know why. I guess I kind of just love the idea of someone being an expert woodsman. I used to watch all those shows growing up about like Les Stroud and Bear Grylls in the woods. I really respect and love a good woodsman. It's like this whole tribe has a weird symbiotic relationship with the woods and knows the ins and outs of their home. This woods, more than Fangorn, seems like the place I would probably be most nervous to come to. And Tolkien really does a good job making the woods in Middle-earth a bit scary. Fangorn looks scary, but it's not that bad. The Old Forest is a bit rough around the edges for the hobbits, but Tom Bombadil is there. And the woods here, the Druidine, just seems like if you walk in, you might not walk out. For the Woses are going to be watching your every single move. It's such a cool aura. And I think Tolkien is building this idea all from these words that Elfhelm says. So Merry goes to follow these lanterns, and they bring him to the edges of the meeting with Theoden, Éomer, and the Woses leader, n-buri-Gh&acirc. This is what the book says, and this is where I really want to break it down, because this is so cool. Presently he came to an open space where a small tent had been set up for the king under a great tree. A large lantern covered above was hanging from a bough and cast a pale circle of light below. There sat Theoden and Éomer, and before them on the ground sat a strange squat shape of a man, gnarled as an old stone, and the hairs of his scanty beard straggled on his lumpy chin like dry moss. He was short-legged and fat-armed, thick and stumpy, and clad only with grass about his waist. Merry felt that he had seen him before somewhere, and suddenly he remembered the Pukelmen of Dunharrow. Here was one of those old images brought to life. Or maybe a creature descended in true line through endless years from the models used by the forgotten craftsmen long ago. Now, the Pukelmen were these carven stones in Dunharrow, the place where Aragorn leads his Dunedain to the Roads of the Dead. They were strange little images, and I really love some of the fan-made art of them because the likeness of the Woses is just so interesting. He's just such a funny-looking guy. But you can tell he's tough, though. Living in the mountains and the cold with just a grass skirt alone, that makes him tough to me. And their first interaction is this. There was a silence as Merry crept nearer, and then the wild man began to speak in answer to some questions, it seemed. His voice was deep and guttural, yet to Merry's surprise he spoke the common speech, though in a halting fashion, and uncouth words were mingled with it. No, father of horsemen, he said, we fight not, hunt only, kill Gorgun in woods, hate orc folk. You hate Gorgun too. We help as we can. Wild men have long ears and long eyes. Know all paths. Wild men live here before stone houses, before tall men come up out of the water. Now, I love the language that Tolkien gives them here. He even gives them certain idiomatic speech, too. I mean, Tolkien's understanding of language is second to none, and I obviously know that he knows more about speech and language than I do, but he knows where speech and culture come from as well. And I love that he says here that they have long ears and long eyes. Seems like a very Woses way of saying that they're keen of eye and ear. And I think that alone and the language that Tolkien employs is just so good in how he gives these people culture just by their language. It's also a really interesting indication here that they were here before the Númenóreans came to Middle-earth. Because the Númenóreans came, and you kind of learn that in the second chapter of The Return of the King, because they set up the stone that they arrived in the south, and they came by sea and they settled in it. So I'm excited for the appendices too, where we learn more, perhaps, about these people and the Númenóreans first coming over. And so their conversation continues to go on, and Éomer is actually confused how the Ghan knows so much. He says, the city is burning, and there are a lot of orcs, a lot more orcs than there are Rohirrim. His response is so interesting. He says, the old man's flat face and dark eyes showed nothing, but his voice was sullen with displeasure. Wild men are wild, free, but not children, he answered. I am great headman n-buri-Gh&acirc. I count many things, stars in sky, leaves on trees, men in the dark. You have a score of score, counted 10 times 5. They have more. Big fight. And who will win? And many more walk round walls of stone houses. First off, I love that this guy sits here counting the stars in the sky and the leaves on the trees. I feel like this is wisdom here too. I just want to know more about them and what they do and what the stars and the leaves on the trees talk to them about. And I think this is one of the things that Tolkien is really trying to get at by making them so mysterious. That these men have very little technology, like the Gondorians have, but they don't have stone houses or weapons like Rohan. Even though they kind of have, their poisoned arrows, they have technology of their own kind, but not maybe the modern day advances of other civilizations in Middle-earth right now. But they absolutely possess more wisdom about the world, specifically about the Druidine Forest, than anyone else in these books, except for maybe Treebeard. Like, Treebeard, he's a person who I think, is communicating on the same level as the Woses and the n-buri-Gh&acirc. But I think this idea further supports that when the n-buri-Gh&acirc is going to say something later on that I'll talk about that kind of further supports this idea that he really knows things that are going on because he senses them and has intuition about them. But I think Tolkien really wants to show how these beings are some of the most intelligent in Middle-earth, even though they don't perhaps have some of the other advancements of other cultures like Rohan or Gondor. There is a tuning with nature that they possess that makes them wise and shrewd and incredibly knowledgeable. And it really makes me want to be one of them. I will touch on this point a bit after to kind of talk about them and what they say with the dawn and the wind. But the conversation in this section keeps going. And it's so interesting because Rohan and Éomer in this particular section are just impatient. He needs to get to Gondor ASAP. And so he says, and yet we need great haste, said Éomer. Moonburg is on fire. Let n-buri-Gh&acirc finish, said the wild man. More than one road he knows. He will lead you by road where no pits are. No Gorgun walk, only wild men and beasts. Many paths were made when Stonehouse folk were stronger. They carved hills as hunters carve beast flesh. Wild men think they ate stone for food. They went through Druidine to Rimon with great wains. They go no longer. Road is forgotten, but not by wild men. Over hill and behind it, it lies, still under grass and tree. There, behind Rimon, and down to Dean, and back at the end to Horseman's Road. Wild men will show you that road. Then you will kill Gorgun and drive away bad dark with bright iron, and wild men can go back to sleep in the wild woods. I think it's fascinating that Gon is helping them out here with the roads that Rohan doesn't even know about. Éomer is feeling the pressure, and Gon just kind of comes out and helps them with the things forgotten. And his motivation for helping them is so that they can kind of go back to sleep in the wild woods, which I really love that. It feels a little bit like where the wild things are. I feel like that just means they can have peace. But again, I think this is Tolkien's ability to create idiomatic language with this idea that the reader kind of just understands the language and the idioms even though they're not their own language. But the Gon is not just wise, he's also trustworthy. Théoden agrees to the Gon to let him lead them through the woods and to the road. And then this is their conversation. If you are faithful, n-buri-Gh&acirc, we will give you rich reward, and you shall have the friendship of the Mark forever. Dead men are not friends to living men, and give them no gifts, said the wild man. But if you live after the darkness, then leave wild men alone in the woods, and do not hunt them like beasts anymore. n-buri-Gh&acirc will not lead you into a trap. He will go himself with father of horsemen, and if he leads you wrong, you will kill him. He's kind of trustworthy, saying that if he leads you into a trap, you can just kill me on the spot. He seems to just kind of like be someone to be wary of, but also someone that I would trust immediately. He doesn't have ulterior motives other than peace for his people in the Druidan. And I can trust a person like that, to be completely honest. But again, Theoden and Éomer need haste. They need to quickly get to Gondor, and the Woses have no horses. So the book says this: "How long will it take to pass by the enemy and come back to the road?" asked Éomer. "We must go at foot pace if you guide us, and I doubt not the way is narrow." "Wild men go quick on feet," said Gon. "Way is wide for 4 horses in Stone Wain Valley yonder." He waved his hand southward. "But narrow at beginning and at end. Wild man could walk from here to Din between sunrise and noon." So they are walking from one beacon to another, from the Eileach to Amon Dîn, in about 5-ish hours, depending on when the sun rises. This is, I think, about like late March, maybe early April in this time. So the sun rises around 7-ish at that time. And the beacons here are probably 20 to 30 miles apart. So essentially they're running a marathon in 5-ish hours in the woods, which is impressive. They are some seriously fast hikers. They are probably not setting any records, but I don't think that I've ever met really anybody who can hike 20 to 30 miles in 5 hours. That is legit hiking. This is the kind of thing that just adds to their coolness as well. But my favorite part about the Ghan comes in the next section. This is what the book says. Éomer says, "What is the hour now?" "Who knows," said Theoden. "All is night now." "It is all dark, but it is not all night," said Gon. "When sun comes, we feel her, even when she is hidden. Already she climbs over east mountains. It is the opening of day in the sky fields." "Then we must set out as soon as may be," said Éomer. "Even so, we cannot hope to come to Gondor's aid today." Now, I made a whole video about this yesterday, so go check that one out. So just suffice it to say that I think that what Tolkien is really saying here is brilliant. And the whole idea that he's talking about is really brilliant. And I think there's a video, or there's a comment on the video yesterday that I had that explained this really, really well. Michael said, "I think that Tolkien was getting at the quality of humans to understand nature that our ancestors had much more than we do in the modern day with our machines. n-buri-Gh&acirc is very much the noble savage from literature. Simple, but his simplicity gives him a complex understanding of nature that we seem to have lost. For all our technology, it can cause us to despair more easily than our ancestors, because we are able to just kind of flip a switch to turn on the lights. But that does nothing to alleviate our spiritual darkness, pain, and depression, which our ancestors had far better ability to handle." I think this comment is perfect for understanding what the Ghan is really about and what the Woses are really trying to communicate to us. It's almost like we build these modern day machines to help us understand the world, but the Ghan can kind of just listen and tap into his intuition and his senses. He can feel the sun even when he cannot see it, and that gives him more hope than it does the men of Rohan, because he trusts his senses. And this is the mark of giving the whole entire army hope, that even though they cannot see the sun, it is there. Even though you cannot feel hope in a situation, there's always a corner to turn. There's always the sun behind the clouds. And this idea is completed in the last thing that he says, which is the goodbye that he says to Theoden. So he brings them to the woods, and the Woses are essentially like just protecting them in the woods by not letting any orcs roam on the borders of the woods, and by killing them if they do. But they are just silent little assassins. And then Gon tells Theoden and Éomer that the orcs have destroyed the wall of Rammas Ecor, which is great news for Éomer, because it's the outer wall protecting Minas Tirith. And again, this means that Éomer can then march through with all the Rohirrim and go right to battle, not having to delay or siege a wall. So the final bit of conversation is one of the coolest that exists of a character that I think exits the page in the book. He is a man of few words, but brims with hope. The book says this: Theoden says, "Good fortune go with you for tidings and for guidance. Kill Gorgun. Kill orc folk. No other words, please, wild men," answered Gon. "Drive away bad air and darkness with bright iron. To do these things we have ridden far," said the king, "and we shall attempt them. But what we shall achieve only tomorrow will show." n-buri-Gh&acirc squatted down and touched the earth with his horny brow in token of farewell. Then he got up as if to depart. But suddenly he stood looking up like some startled woodland animal, sniffing a strange air. A light came in his eyes. "Wind is changing," he cried. And with that, in a twinkling as it seemed, he and his fellows had vanished into the glooms, never to be seen by any rider of Rohan again. How cool is that? What an exit this is. But again, I think it's so fascinating and interesting that the idea that the Gon can just kind of sense things like the wind and like the clouds and the sun. He knows that the clouds cannot cover forever. And he seems to just kind of have the patience of a woodman and knows seasons and knows climates and knows, things are going to be okay. He is just such a great character. And Tolkien in 3 pages gives this guy such an aura about him. Again, he does this in 3 pages. He makes such an interesting character and such an interesting people that I cannot wait to get more into this people. And I really hope that this continues on in the work of Tolkien. I know that Tolkien wrote a lot, and I'm only not even finished with Lord of the Rings, but I have to say, whatever he wrote, it wasn't enough. I want more. I want to be in this world forever. It's just so fun. But all this was just an essay to just praise Tolkien, the n-buri-Gh&acirc, and the Woses people. I think that they're all the best. But make sure you subscribe if you like the video. Make sure you like the video if you made it this far. And as always, remember to look toward Numenor that was, and beyond to Elvenhome that is, and to that which is beyond Elvenhome and will ever be. I'll see you in the next one.